In this episode, you will learn how to divorce him and still keep your money. Welcome to Women Winning Divorce, the podcast helping successful women navigate divorce with dignity so you can protect yourself, your children, and your assets. I'm Heather Quick, founding attorney at Florida Women's Law Group, where women win at life. This week, we had Donna Cates on the show, and we had a great conversation about helping women make smart decisions about their money and divorcing the man, not the money. Stay tuned for the full episode. Welcome to this week's episode of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, owner and attorney at Florida Women's Law Group. Today, Donna Cates is joining us. Donna is a financial advisor, wealth builder, speaker, and certified divorce financial analyst, and is passionate about helping women make informed decisions about their money. Welcome to the show, Donna.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I am excited, and I know our listeners will be also, because today we are going to talk about how to divorce the man, not the money. Great idea. And helping women make smart decisions about their money and why a man is not a financial plan. Donna, for our listeners, would you share a little bit about yourself, your own divorce story, and, kind of why you're working in this family law space now?
I'm happy to do that. So I've been working as a financial advisor for over 24 years. Now have been practicing in the divorce space as a certified divorce financial analyst for over 20 years. So I actually divorced very young. It was a eye-opening experience for me, but that's not actually what got me into working in this space. What I found was that a lot of attorneys in our area were referring women to me post-divorce, and I was discovering well after the fact that they weren't making the smartest decisions about their money. So that's what inspired me. But I will tell you, having walked that path before, I understand the fear. I understand the indecision. I understand all the things that come up when divorce is mentioned. So that kind of gives me at least a little bit more knowledge than the advisor who's not been down that path.
And that's wonderful because, that's a huge part of it also for women, understanding the road ahead and the challenges that are going to come. And, I think the more personal experience you have, whether it's yourself, a family member, or just years of working in it, you can really give your client so much confidence in just knowing, hey, I know you don't know what's up ahead, but I do because I've been doing this so long and I'm going to walk you through this.
Yeah, I agree with you, Heather. It's like I tell most of the women that I work with, we've been through hundreds of cases. We do this daily. They hopefully have only experienced one divorce. So having professional is so important.
Okay, so let's talk about divorce the man, not the money, because that is great. That is a great tagline, just says it all. So how do we help women do that?
Well, the reality is I could go 100 different directions with this, but the reality is that most women kind of take a back seat to the money when in their relationships. And this isn't because we're not intelligent or able to do the money stuff. I think it's more because we are just all overwhelmed with responsibilities. So if that's not our cup of tea, we gladly hand that off to our spouse and say, you handle it. But that puts us in a position of not knowing. So I think that for me, when you're divorcing, especially, the biggest fear is, oh my God, what's my life going to look like after divorce? I don't know all this stuff. So it's more about getting your hands around what do you have? What do you need? And how do we do this division of assets as amicably as possible, but making informed decisions versus emotional decisions.
And that can be so difficult, as we know, and it just takes, we just have to keep saying it and the patience to help our clients understand, that's an emotional decision. At least, sit on it for a bit before we make anything final. Now, you said you got divorced very young. So were you already in the financial world space when that happened?
No, I was not in that space at that time. I literally had just started working because I was straight out of college and I
Okay.
was only married 13 months. So it was a short lived marriage, but it definitely had a lasting impact.
Yes. And I think even that, right? Because that was unexpected, but you were young, but it still is very difficult, I would imagine. And it took a lot
Absolutely.
out of you. Now, within that, how did that kind of frame the way you were looking at now your work life, your career? Because you were married young, but then divorced really young. And that may have allowed you to say, okay, now I've got to do this on my own. But I'd love to know that from you because I do think that probably impacted you in your career.
It certainly did because even though I was capable intellectually of taking care of myself over that brief marriage. We didn't have a lot. It's not like someone that's, in a gray divorce and they have a ton of assets and such. It wasn't complex, but I found out very quickly that the rug can be pulled out from underneath you at any moment. So I very quickly became financially responsible. I said, I've only got myself to depend on. I'm going to make sure I've got my ducks in a row. I know what it is I'm working towards. So I was never just doing things blindly. And it definitely, kind of opened my eyes to the fears and realities that people are facing as they're going through divorce.
Absolutely. Talk about women going through divorce and just like starting at the high level, right? For some of our listeners who are thinking, I really don't know anything. And I know there come a lot of feelings with that that may prevent them from asking the questions, right? The shame, the embarrassment, and the fear. But, what would you say? What do you say to those women who are listening and who are just like, man, whether they're working or not, they just don't have a handle on what they own and what they owe.
Well, I'll tell you, it's why I'm so passionate about the work because women, we just kind of stick our heads in the sand. And the reality is 50% of marriages end in divorce, more of second marriages do. And women outlive men. So it's not an if, but a when we're going to have to be financially responsible for ourselves. So that's what I encourage women. A lot of people stay in marriages because of their fear and not understanding whether or not they're going to be able to take care of themselves on their own. So the first step to me is literally understanding what your financial well-being looks like. And if you're even just engaged in traditional financial planning, doing that with your spouse so that you understand what your reality is today is a really, really good place to start. And I had one client that said, my husband's never going to share that information with me. It becomes a question of, okay, are you okay with that? Are you okay being
Mhm.
kept in the dark when it comes to your money? So I coached her on having a conversation with her spouse because they haven't said the D word yet, but had a conversation with him saying, I know and appreciate the fact that you enjoy doing all the financial stuff for our family. I'm afraid that if something happens to you, I'm not going to have a clue of what to do. Whether it's, you've been injured and are in a coma or something, or if you die unexpectedly. I have no knowledge. So I think it would make sense if we could engage in, a financial planning relationship, or at least you and I have full disclosure of what everything is, where everything is, so that if something does happen, I'm not left in the dark and I can continue to take care of the kid. So that's kind of a good way to approach that if you aren't, the financially savvy person and to start gathering information that you need.
I appreciate that you said that because I think we forget that too often. And it's almost like divorce by death because, life's short and it is unexpected. Things can happen. And I think that that could be equally, if not more, scary because just like that, right? At least in divorce, even if you got served and you didn't expect it, okay, there's a process, right? And we're gonna get through it, even if the beginning is difficult. But in such a situation, if something unexpectedly happened to your spouse and you don't even know anything and don't have the passwords to even get onto the accounts, and it's going to take some time within the probate court, like you are going to really have a difficult time. And I don't think that is what, well, I don't think your spouse, that is their intent or that they have ever thought of that. So, and I think it's a good place to start. Whether, like you said, you're thinking about a divorce or not, you should know where everything is and you should understand and take that step. Even if on the past you're like, oh, you're taking care of it, I'm good, right? It's time to take that step and begin to understand what there is.
And Heather, I'll share with you too that unfortunately in our industry, we're still a very male dominated industry in the financial services world, but a lot of people will meet with their financial advisor and that male advisor is literally not including the female, even if she's sitting there in the meetings.
Mhm.
So that's another thing to be aware of. If you have a financial advisor, financial planner, and you're not being included in those conversations, I would call them on that. I would just say, hey, I'm here. I'd appreciate, you addressing me as well. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I don't know why men have a tendency to do that, but it
Mhm.
happens often. So, just pull up your big girl britches and say, hey, I'm here at the table and I would appreciate being included in the conversations and the decision.
Absolutely. That makes me think of, so I used to, like, when we were building the firm, when I was building the firm, I was meeting all kind of new people. And so I would meet young female financial advisors. And so we would agree to meet. They always had to bring the guy with them. And then he ran the meeting. And I started saying, no, I don't want to meet with you. Like if she and I are going to work together, I don't need you to explain everything, but that was part of there's always the guy and the girl because the men have realized, oh, women want to talk to women. So then they bring them in, but it was a little bit of a bait and switch, which I didn't care for. And I found that to be very much the case even early on, like our first meeting with a financial advisor, my husband, just talking to him as if I didn't know any. I'm smart. Maybe you could, help me out here. But anyway, that was a side issue. Let's talk about this. So, Donna, you have explained like some people are investments and some people are bills. What does that mean?
Think of it this way. Either somebody is contributing to you, to your emotional well-being, your financial well-being, or they're energy drainers and taking away from you. So I call those people the bills. So when you're looking at, and this is a big help if you're thinking about divorce, but you're just kind of on the fence and are really not sure, is to ask yourself, is my spouse an investment or is he a bill? And it's a hard reality to look at, but just asking yourself that simple question can help you understand whether or not you need to stay in that situation or if you deserve something better.
And I think it's a good question, right? To ask yourself. Now, you talked about really, going into the divorce space, and I know you've said before, that women leave a lot on the table. Why do you think that is?
I think it's just not understanding, not having knowledge. And that's why, working with a financial professional can be so empowering because we don't know what we don't know. I had one client, her husband actually brought her in to meet with me, thinking that it was very clear after about 5 minutes in that meeting that he didn't even include the fact that he had a pension and
Ooh.
he was willing to he was literally willing to share the 401k, but he didn't include any information about the pension. Well, she didn't know he had a pension. So she didn't even know to ask about it. She didn't even know it was missing from the document. So that's the thing is we have to go through the process working with the appropriate professional that understands all of the things that you need to be considering so that you can be coached on how to get that information. And even if it's something that you can't get yourself or your spouse isn't willing to share with you, that's when your attorney is going to be able to gather it for you. But you've got to tell the attorney, I'm not sure if he has a pension or not. I know he's got a 401k. I know we've got IRA accounts, but I'm not sure. So let's ask.
Right. Sometimes I think when, we certainly have had those clients in the past and still do. Well, my husband and I, he says we can do everything without lawyers, which I would say is a big red flag. And not that I am on the pro lawyer side, but so that you're making an educated decision. Just like understanding the finances. If you have no idea what you're entitled to, how do you know whether you're the right decisions or and I think that oftentimes, women are seen as they're being adversarial because they want a lawyer rather than the husband. I'm just making a sound business decision. Of course, I'm getting a lawyer to help us draw all this up. And it's like, well, isn't she entitled to somebody to advise her as well? But men see this so negatively. And very often the other side's like, oh, now they just want to litigate. It's like, that's not necessarily the case. We just want to advise our client and make sure she's getting full disclosure, right? We are aware of everything that exists and that it is being divided appropriately according to the law. And that's a big deal, especially the longer your marriage is.
And I can't tell you the number of women that I encounter who say, I don't want the divorce. He's asking for it. They don't want to hire the attorney. And they say, well, he says his attorney can take care of everything. And
Mhm.
I so caution against that because you cannot afford to go unrepresented, period.
Exactly. Right. It's just there's too much you don't know. And legal space is designed for lawyers and judges who understand and people who've been trained. They understand the laws, they understand the procedure. If you don't, you will be lost. And it may really harm you down the road because you can't go and say, oh, I want to do over. I didn't ask for this. It's too late, usually.
Right.
Now, let's talk about the Certified Divorce Financial Analyst designation, because I think that's really important. And I'd love for you to explain that to our listeners, like why you decided to do that and, what that really means.
Awesome. So the certification is designed to help financial professionals understand the impact of decisions that are made through the divorce process. Anybody that's a financial advisor can do the number crunching and tell you what your life's going to look like down the road.
Mhm.
However, it takes a specialist who understands the law well enough to be able to say, if you choose to keep the house, because you don't want to leave, you don't want to take the children out of the only home they've known, and you don't want them to have to change school districts. You can make that choice, but what's that financial impact going to be if you get that up? And oh, don't forget, if you're taking all the equity in the home, that means that you're going to have to buy out your spouse's share. Where's that money going to come from? Are you going to be able to get a mortgage in your name? Do you have enough income? Do you have enough credit? So every financial decision that we make through this process has to be evaluated to understand what will be the short term and the long term impact of that decision, including, what's the tax impact going to be? There are so many moving pieces, and that's the job as a CDFA is to help you understand not just, what everything's going to look like the day the divorce is finalized, because the court system, their job is to do that equitable distribution. And is if they get to 50-50, oh, yeah, you're getting 50% of the assets and he as well, that's a good day. But that may not be good when we look down the road. So that's what we do as a certified divorce financial analyst is help you understand the impact of the decisions that you're making. And we're able to run different scenarios. You may come to me and say, I definitely want to keep the house. And I can show you, well, if you choose to, this is what it's going to look like. But what if we did something different?
The understanding the future implications of the decisions you're making today, which if you don't have the information, you won't know. Now, you've shared before on other podcasts that the more expert you have, the more expensive your divorce will be, is a false premise. And I'd love for you to please share your thoughts on that with us.
Awesome. That's the thing. When somebody comes to visit you, Heather, they're not excited about giving you that retainer, right?
Mhm.
That's not how we really want to spend our money. Nor when you say, oh, you need a financial professional on your team. They're really not excited about having to pay me. They don't balk so much at working with counselors because they know they need the mental health and support, and they probably have some insurance coverage on it. But the reality is there are so many moving pieces to the divorce process that it's imperative that you hire the professional that's expert in that area. And it's like an attorney. You know about money, you know assets, you know the division of assets, but you may not know as much as I do on the long term impact. So, hiring someone like myself to be on your team to work with your attorney and your mortgage broker and your real estate agent, all of the players that you need, that's actually going to be a money saver because I can help you make more informed decisions, not leaving money on the table, understanding how to avoid expensive, errors. It feels like you're having to spend more upfront, but the reality is because you're working with a team member who's expert in that area is going to save you money over the long term. We don't have any problem spending 20, 30, $40,000 getting married. But when it comes to divorce, we're like, I don't want to spend any money, but
Mhm.
you deserve it. So you have to invest in yourself in the process.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. How are you willing to spend that same, which is really for yourself. It's investing in yourself. You're worth it to understand the process and what you're entitled to. Now, for some of our listeners who are thinking, I don't know where to begin, Donna, what would you help them understand? Like, what are a couple, two or three of the documents that they should be looking for before they go see financial planner?
I will tell you, if you're thinking about divorce, it's not going to hurt you to go ahead and meet with a financial advisor just to get the conversation started. I provide my clients with an extensive checklist of all of the things that we need and actually a little bit more detail than what attorneys are asking for. But if you can start pulling together financial documents, one of the essentials is going to be tax returns. If you can get your hand on 2 or 3 years of tax returns, that's going to give you some information about income, dividend income. It's chock full of information. Also getting running your credit report. You can
Mm.
only do that for yourself, but understanding what all of the household debts are is imperative. So those are two documents that I would ask you to come to an initial meeting with to help us start that conversation.
And, it just takes some digging, figure out the tax return. Shouldn't be that difficult as well. But why do you think women stick their head in the sand sometimes when it comes to finances?
I think it's just because we're all overwhelmed. It's not that we're not capable or intelligent enough to do the money stuff. It's just, we're raising children, managing the household, working, running a business, all of the things that we do. If somebody else says, hey, I'll take care of that, easy to say, okay, honey, I'll let you do that. I don't think it's intentional. I think it's detrimental for your peace of mind but that's why, that's why you hear me say all of the time, a man is not a financial plan. And I'm not saying that just to women who are thinking about divorce. I'm talking to all.
Yeah.
We need to be more knowledgeable about everything with our money so that we are prepared when life does throw us a curveball.
Exactly. Now, from your book, we have a great quote that says, I've learned it doesn't matter whether you are poor or rich. If you are a minimum wage or six-figure earner, you will experience the fear of the unknown. Let's talk a
Correct.
little bit about that because that's big. It keeps a lot of people from taking action.
Absolutely. So I think most people will stay in a marriage longer than they should have simply because they aren't willing to face the hard questions. They're not willing to discover what might life look like if I were to do something different. So I think that the fear, like for me, when was first divorcing, when I was very young, I thought I was pregnant. The day I went home to tell my husband, I stopped and got this pregnancy test. That's when he said, I want a divorce. Right. So that was brutal. I mean, the timing could not have been more horrific for me. But now I'm going, okay, we're in a rental property. Am I going to be able to afford this on my own? What's going to happen, with our little bit of retirement we've already started saving? Am I going to have to go home and live with my parents? I did all the unknowns, and that overwhelming fear stops us in our tracks. And then we're paralyzed and unable to take small steps, even baby steps. But we have to start somewhere. And that's again another point on the value of having a team. You're probably going to need some coaching, whether that's a divorce coach or counselor to unpackage all of the emotional issues. You're going to need somebody to help you navigate the financial world and that divorce attorney. So you can't do it alone, but the fear, we have to understand the fear is real. It's not going away until we educate ourselves and take proactive steps.
Now, and that's true. And there's so many unknowns and it is scary, but one step at a time. And once you start educating yourself and understanding, it's going to become less scary, less unknown. Um, but let's talk how would you advise somebody to protect themselves from their spouse ruining their financial landscape like ahead of divorce?
So there's a couple of pieces here. First thing is if money's already been spent and depleted, whether it was appropriate or not, you can't get it back. So if you've already filed for divorce, of course, your attorney can ask that you both maintain the status quo. And a lot of that can't happen until you've actually filed for divorce. So if you fear that your spouse is depleting assets, spending money inappropriately, hiding money, anything like that, just the simple step of hiring that attorney and saying, I don't want the assets to be depleted will allow you the opportunity to get that status quo put in order. Now, as far as another thing that I've seen have a negative impact is credit. So you can be on joint accounts and have your credit ruined when you're not aware of how your spouse is using that credit. She wanted to keep her house. She said, I'm absolutely keeping the house. I can afford the mortgage. But what she didn't know at the time that she made that decision was that her husband, her now ex-husband, had used 100% of the home equity line on the house. So there literally was no equity in the house. Shortly after the divorce, she figured out she could not afford to maintain the house. She could afford that mortgage, couldn't afford to maintain it, right? So she ended up having to sell it. And that's when she did the credit report and discovered that her husband had or ex-husband had used all the home equity line. So now she's got a house that she's got to sell. She did not do that.
Divorce.
Fortunately, she didn't come to a good attorney like you because a good attorney would have uncovered that before any decisions were actually made. So again, another reason to work with a divorce attorney who knows all of the right things to ask.
Well, and I think that brings up a good point that will, advise to the listeners. You may think, hey, I can afford this mortgage, but you need to get the mortgage statement and understand, right? You might think, oh, hey, houses are selling great in this neighborhood. I know what the mortgage payment is. I can do this. And I probably have equity, but you should never make that assumption without verifying through the financial documents because that's terrible.
To add to that, the fact that it's not a matter of whether or not you can afford to pay the mortgage, you typically have to have that refinanced into just your name if it's not already in your name only, right? So now you have the question of, can I even qualify for the mortgage? If you're not the major breadwinner, and a lot of people think because they're going to be getting alimony, they're automatically going to be approved for a new mortgage. But those banks aren't going to give you money until they've seen proof of that income, and not even for a short period of time. It's got to be a long period of time for that to be included as income to qualify you for that mortgage.
And, for our listeners, those are things that you can absolutely determine before you sign those divorce papers and understand, what do you need a settlement to look like in order to qualify. I mean, that's not a guarantee, but it's a lot more than thinking, oh, I'll just go in and talk to them after the divorce. Because a lot of things are come into play with that. Exactly. The length of time of this support, for sure. Now, let's talk about your book. You have a book. Is it already out, or it's coming out, and wrote
Yes.
a portion of it?
It is out. It's called Divorce Decoded, a manifesto for women navigating divorce and beyond. And I decided to write this book as an anthology because nobody just wants to read like this is how you go through a divorce. What I felt like women would benefit from is having personal experience, personal stories from all of the different professionals out there who work with women when they're in transition like that. So my chapter talks literally about what you called your episode for today, divorcing the man, not your money. That's what I'm educating on, all of the things that we've been talking about. But we also include a counselor. She's been through divorce. She tells her story. She shares client stories on all of the emotional issues. Then we have a divorce coach, same thing. We actually have a stylist in the book too that talks about how clothes impact us. Like, okay, when we get divorced, are we still going to dress exactly the same way? Or is that am I going to be hanging on to old memories? Do I need to rebuild a wardrobe? It's comprehensive. So I think everybody would benefit from it. It is available on Amazon, and the proceeds from the sale of that book go to an organization that provides financial literacy for women, and that's called Savvy Lady. So I'd encourage anybody that's thinking about it or already in the divorce process, even post divorce, I would consider, purchasing that.
Thank you so much. That's exciting. We'll definitely have the links in the show notes. But, let's talk a little bit as we're rounding down, though, about having your own career or a plan, and how important that is for women, despite how happily married they may be right now with young children. But you and I've seen the other side of a lot of that. And I'd love to have your input.
It's a really good question, Heather, especially for women who have taken themselves out of the workforce, to raise their families, because now you're in an insecure position because you may have been out of the workforce for 5 years, 10, 15, depending on your profession. You may need to go relearn the entire job or get
Mm.
recertified. So I think if you choose to not work, that's absolutely fabulous. But you always need to have some skin in the game on staying on top of keeping yourself relevant for career opportunities. And that's, again, with all that we have on our plates, that's typically not our first priority. But the reality is, like we've already said, chances are you're going to be on your own at some point. So we really do need to take into consideration, what can I be doing for myself to make sure that I am employable should I need to go to work, or if
Mm.
I just choose to go to work. So that there are coaches that can help you with understanding where your strengths lie and where what might be the best career path for you. But just like I said, having some skin in the game and not forgetting that at some point you may want to work or need to work.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. I think that's important. And Donna, before we go, can you impart on our listeners what you've learned about women and their resilience throughout your career and experience?
We women are tough, and we all know this. The reality is, when life throws something at us, we do what has to be done. We can do smart things. We are coming to the table with a different vision if we're in the divorce process, but we got this. Use your gut intuition, surround yourself with a good team, and get the support that you need to get through the process. We women are strong, and we're here to support you.
Well, thank you so much. And also, Donna, where can our listeners find you for more information and resources?
You're welcome to visit my website at moneymatterswealth.com. I'm also on social media under Donna S. Cates. One of my great platforms for divorce is Divorce Divas Alabama. That's one of my Facebook.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And we've reached the end of our show. Thank you so much for Donna Cates for joining us to discuss divorcing the man, not the money. Listeners, if you or someone you know is going through a divorce or is thinking about a divorce in the Northeast Florida area, please reach out to us at floridawomensLawGroup.com. You'll find our practice areas and the link to our website in the show notes, as well as Donna's links. Thank you for listening.